thinking we're going to have, after this lesson, it'll be 6 more weeks actually, 5 more weeks. Depends on if I can get Babylon into one lesson. But it has been a great study on the book of Revelation. It challenged me. And I think we're going to get into the parts that are curious. You know, you get through the horsemen, you get through some of the details that we got through. But this week and next week, we're going to look at the Antichrist and such. Then the week after, the end of the tribulation, then chronologically, and then some events that are going to take place in the tribulation, then into the millennium reign of Jesus Christ, and then into the New Jerusalem. And so that's the roadmap for what we're going to be doing with this. And it's been just fun for me to put together. I've really, really enjoyed it. We spent 30 weeks showing videos of Pastor Greg, which was outstanding. But there's something I really do like about doing my own Sunday schools. And just for the record, the reason I don't do Prescott Sunday schools is because you can watch them. And a lot of you do. And Pastor Greg's going to do it better than I can. And so, this has been very, very enjoyable. I need some scriptures. We'll get this. Revelation 22, 6 through 9. Steph. And then Revelation 13, 1 and 2. Jeremy. Randy, would you get Daniel 7, 2 and 3? Then I need Revelation 17, 15. Aiden. 1 John 2, 18. Logan. And we'll stop there and pick up the rest as we kind of change a little bit of gears there. Okay. So let's read our main text, Revelation 22, 6 through 9.
Then he said to me, "These words are faithful and true, and the Lord God of the holy prophets sent his angel to show his servants the things which must shortly take place. Behold, I am coming quickly. Blessed is he who keeps the words of the prophecy of this book." Now I, John, saw and heard these things, and when I heard and saw, I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel who showed me these things. Then he said to me, "See that you do not do that, for I am your fellow servant, and of your brethren the prophets, and of those who keep the words of this book. Worship God."
And so, keep or obey the words of this prophecy. If we are going to understand the words of this prophecy, it is good to look at the book, and that's what we're doing. We're not going to spend time going down every detail, as I mentioned before. We're just kind of trying to give overviews of the book and deal with some of the main themes and issues of the book of Revelation. Because, again, for a lot of people, this is a very frightening book. And so as you look at it, and I don't mean frightening in the way that, oh, we'll be here for it. Many of you know we won't. But frightening in the way of, like, I don't understand it. And so, therefore, it gets open to a lot of strange interpretations and twistings that we're trying to, I'm trying to give you enough that you can avoid those. And because, you know, every once in a while a bizarre book comes out on the end times and it's like, this isn't even right. But this hopefully will give you enough for that. So are there any questions or comments to this point in the study? Okay. Randy. Right, yeah. I definitely, as we get closer, things begin to fall into place. It makes sense. Okay. So we want to begin, and with this will take us 2 weeks to look at the Antichrist and his rise. Now, I did mention that I do believe that in the first horse of Revelation is the white horse. And I do believe that to be the Antichrist, the rise of this political leader. But we looked last week at the 2 prophets And so Darren found the slide, and I want to just show that slide right now. And it mentioned that they were going to be killed and then resurrected at the midpoint of the tribulation. And so the slide, it's number two. So you'll see these terms in the book of Revelation and in the book of Daniel. 1,260 days is 3.5 years based on the lunar calendar, which is the Jewish calendar. So what the Jews would do is they had a calendar that went 360 days based on the fullness of the moon, the newness of the moon, the full moon, 28 days. Each of their months would be 28 days. And then every 7 years, they would add another month of December, if you will, to bring the calendar back around into a correct time frame. And so we function on the solar calendar, which is technically 364 days and 364 and a half quarter day, which is why we have to add the leap year every 4 years, but not on the 100, like the even millennium. We didn't have a leap year in 2000 because the way they figure it. I don't know. God bless those who have figured that all out, because I love that kind of stuff, but man, it's complicated. But anyway, then you have 42 months, which is again 3.5 years. You have the term 3.5, and you have the term time, times, and half a time. So again, you're talking about 3.5. So that space, very important. We're going to look again at that this week, but I wanted to lock your minds in on this, that we are at the midpoint of the tribulation. This is the midpoint. And so the Antichrist, very famous character, if you will, out of the tribulation. Of course, he will be a world leader, and he will rise up, and this begins with the treaty with Israel. And so Revelation 13, 1 and 2.
Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his 10 horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority.
Okay, so let's first examine this scripture a little bit. The beast or the Antichrist. And they are common, they're used, I'll touch on how many times this is used. It's later in my notes that we'll get there. But he sees this beast rising up out of the sea. Now, to a Jew, remember the book of Revelation is very Old Testament. It possibly is the most Old Testament book of the New Testament. They say Jonah is the most New Testament book of the Old Testament, that it had to do with reaching Gentile nations and such. The sea is symbolic of Gentile nations. Now, a Gentile nation is simply a non-Jewish nation. So we're all Gentiles, unless you have Jewish blood and roots in you. You would be considered a Gentile. So out of the sea, out of the nations that are not Israel, rises this world leader. This is very similar to the thought of Daniel 7, 2 and 3.
And then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans.
Daniel 7, 2 and 3.
I thought you said Daniel 2, 2 and 3. Sorry.
I might have.
Okay, 2 and 3. And Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea. And the 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another.
Okay, and so here's Daniel's dream, and we're going to touch on this a little bit further in on this study as well. He sees this dream, and he sees these 4 beasts rising up. Does anyone know what the 4 beasts he sees rising up represent? Randy?
Past kings or past nations.
At his point, not necessarily past. They actually were.
Well, they were.
One was happening right.
They're past from our perspective.
From our perspective, they're past. So he's.
They're nations that had existed in his time frame that he had already prophesied about.
Okay, but they're not just nations.
They're actual people, right? Well,
That's possible.
I say nations and people because kings were their nations.
Yeah, but I'm looking for something else.
Okay.
Bro? Empires. World dominating empires. That's what he's seeing here. Right? The Babylonians ruled pretty much the known world at this time. There would be modern day Iraq, and they had conquered, Nebuchadnezzar had conquered most of the known world. And so this went up. You can read this in Daniel. I think there were 127 provinces under under King Nebuchadnezzar, from India to Ethiopia. So this would have stretched all over the known Middle East, from what is modern day India to the Horn of Africa, would have been covered by Babylon. This would have included Turkey. This would have included what we would call the stands today. This would have included Syria and Saudi Arabia, Egypt, on through Libya. All of these areas would have been under the control, and probably some of Europe, under the control of Babylon. They were then defeated by the Medes and the Persians, who took over as an empire. He sees them rise up. Then he sees the next one, the Byzantine. And then finally, the Romans rise up. And out of this, he sees these happen. And these are beasts that begin, they are similar to Nebuchadnezzar's dream of chapter 2 that he explains in chapter 3, which is very interesting because if you read that, it's actually King Nebuchadnezzar writing some of chapters 3 and 4. And so these were 4 great world powers that rise out of the sea. So they're rising. He's giving the picture that they're not just there, but they are rising up. Randy?
Would you consider that those nations that he's describing would be overlapped and make one at the end?
We'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
Don't get ahead of me. Revelation 17, verse 15.
And the angel said to me, "The waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages."
Okay, so here's the thought: that the waters, the sea, and we'll deal with who this is talking about when we get to 17. But it represents the masses of people from every nation and every language. So this is the picture. The beast is going to take over. And this is why we're going to look at next week, because I know this is a big question. We're going to get into the mark next week. But the understanding is that he's going to have world dominance, world leadership. Now, whether that will be allow governments to stay and just be under his authority, or whether he will have total dominion, we don't know. What we do know is that his spirit is alive and well on planet Earth even today. And that's found in 1 John 2:18.
Dear children, the last hour is here. You have heard the Antichrist is coming, and already many such Antichrists have appeared. From this we know that the last hour has come.
So the big A, Antichrist, this is talking about the man we're looking at here, the one that will rise up, the world leader. Many Antichrists have come. The spirit, of course, of Antichrist is permeating the earth. We know that there have been those who have tried. There have been some very, very wicked leaders that have risen up, from Adolf Hitler to Caesar. You could probably include Napoleon in this. You could, and you could get into, two-bit dictators throughout the world and such. But this thought here is that we know that this spirit of Antichrist will be in the world, that we can identify, it's the last days. We can tell that this is going on, that this is coming into this time. And this is why the world will receive him very readily, because they share the same spirit. Right? Just so we are clear on this definition too, many times we think of pro and anti. Right? There's the pro whatever, pro-life movement and, anti-life movement. They call it pro-abortion, but they're anti-life, right? Or but it also can mean a counterfeit. And that's what really we're talking about here, a counterfeit of Christ. He's going to come and woo the world. I heard interesting, AI technology is bizarre, scary in many ways. But one of the fascinating things that you can do with AI now is translate. And so they were saying, one I think it was a video, a news article or something I was reading was very fascinating, is, if you don't speak German and you see an old speech of Hitler, it sounds like he's just mad, angry, and, telling everybody what jerks everyone else is and how but that's not what he's doing. And you can translate it now with this AI technology and how he was seducing Germany.
Yeah. Amen.
Not by telling them how bad the Jews were or how bad England was or the United States or Russia or communism or fascist, he was a fascist government, but whatever. But as you look at all of that, he's actually telling the people of Germany how great they are, how wonderful Germany can be, and it's fascinating to think about that. He says it, and the German language is just a rough language. And as they just, and he's just putting out there, seducing the people of Germany. And that's what the Antichrist will do. We know that he'll be the fourth beast. Now remember, in Daniel said, I saw 4 beasts coming out. He will be the fourth beast. And the Bible says he's different than all the others. And so, did I give out Daniel 7:7 or did I stop there?
I think you stopped.
Okay, so I need Daniel 7:7. Who would get that? Jeremy. And then I need our text again, Revelation 13:1 and 2. Steph. Then I need Daniel 7:4 through 6. Randy. Revelation 13 and verse 3. Aiden. And Revelation 13:11 and 12. Steph Walton. All right. So, Revelation calls him the beast. In fact, I found it here. In Revelation, 37 times the Antichrist is referred to as the beast. I think it's only 4 times he's referred to as the Antichrist. In Daniel, he's referred to as the beast 7 times. So we'll be going back and forth talking about this with the book of Daniel. Daniel 7:7.
After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns.
Okay, and so here again is this mention of 10 horns. And so when you see people who do artist descriptions of the beast, he's always this devil-looking guy with 10, five sets of horns sticking out of his head, Looks a little bit like Bullwinkle, And he's got that look, and it's like, but does anyone have any idea what it's talking about when it talks about 10 horns and 10 crowns? Rose? Yes, but let's back it a little bit. Rowan? 10 kings or 10 leaders, exactly. 10 leaders are going to put him in. We have a federalist government. And it's a fascinating, the United States is fascinating in government because not only do we have a president and a Congress, Senate and House of Representatives on a federal level, each state has their own governor and some branch and some form of legislatures. That varies a little bit. Most mimic the federal government with senates and houses. New York does. Not all states do, because some of them are pretty rural and low populations and such, that they might have a different form of that. And then we even have local municipalities and authorities in that sense. And so we're very fascinated because and Katrina proved this. I don't know if you remember the Hurricane Katrina. But the way our government works, the federal government cannot just step in. It has to be asked by the state. The state can't just step in. It has to be asked by the local municipality. And so President Bush got a lot of criticism for not stepping in, but the problem is the mayor of New Orleans had not asked the governor, and the governor had not asked the president to declare a state of emergency. And the way we're set up is not top down, but bottom up. Now, you can argue whether that works or whether that's the best way, but most places it's top down. That's the way socialism works. That is definitely the way communism and fascism work. It is also definitely the way monarchs worked. Top down. The word of the king was law. Right? We're in merit. We can't really grasp our minds around that. We can complain about our government. You don't like the president, you don't like the congressman, you don't like the governor, you don't like whatever. You have the right. We have entire industries called talk radio that have grown up around complaining about whatever. You can't fathom how top down you don't do that. You can't, that's not allowed. And so these 10, many believe will be the 10 most powerful nations of the European Union, will set up the Antichrist coming out of the old Roman Empire. And we'll get to that a little bit as we go on. But I just want to clarify the 10 horns. These are talking about nations. These are talking about rulers. And so John describes the other parts of the kingdom, which are fascinating here. Revelation 13, 1 and 2.
And I saw the beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its head. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority.
So it is very interesting that as he describes, John describes this beast, he's bringing in aspects or characteristics of the Daniel's three, this is Randy's question, three previous kingdoms, three previous world rulers. Daniel 7, 4 through 6.
And the first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand upon the feet as a man. And a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it rose up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this, behold, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And after this I saw the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible.
Okay, that's enough. Yeah, we read that. All right. So here's the beast in Revelation 13. Maybe we can just go back to that. And it says that he had the head. The beast looked like a leopard, had the feet of a bear, and the mouth of a lion. And these are the 3 other kingdoms that were spoken of by Daniel, the 3 other world leaders, the empires that would take over the world. And so parts of these are in each of them. And then, of course, it says that the dragon gave the beast. Who is the dragon? Rose? Nope. The beast is the Antichrist. Rowan? Satan. Right? Revelation 12, we'll read it probably next week, but Revelation 12, the old dragon, the serpent of old, known as Satan, the devil. Right? It comes and gives him the authority. And so they're making up, what he's telling us is that this final kingdom will have parts of all the other kingdoms. This is going to be a far-reaching, global kingdom. That the world will finally, as it's some want, be under one authority. And so this will be a world leader. This is what I want to bring out of this part. A world leader that is going to have world dominance, and that he is going to take over and control the earth. All right. Any questions to this point? Logan.
I just want to add like a kind of interesting story I saw maybe last year, but the UN had a sculpture. You know about this? No? Perfect. The UN had a sculpture made by some artists, and it's a leopard with wings, and they put it outside the headquarters, and then a lot of people were like, that looks really close to Daniel's prophecy, and eventually they took it down.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of little things that you can point to. Some have said that outside of Brussels headquarters, there's one flagpole that yet to have a flag. And so I don't know. I've never been there. Can't tell you. But he's going to have world dominance. Okay. So I pointed out that halfway through the tribulation, very important part, we looked last week, this is when the 2 witnesses are killed. This week we need to understand this, that also, and we don't know if it's a result of him killing the witnesses, if the witnesses are killed as a result of this, we don't know. But at the midpoint of the tribulation, this world leader will also be killed. Revelation 13 and verse 3.
One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast.
Okay, so it is believed, and let's read this, and Revelation 13, 11 and 12.
Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed.
Okay. So again, the pictures, the 7 heads, leaders of the world, whether some have pointed and said that could be the G7. Who knows if America will still even be around at that point. But these 7 leaders cause this man to rise, but he's killed in the middle of the tribulation. And the picture is of a gunshot to the head, a fatal wound to the head. That is the picture that is being brought through here, and that he recovers 3 days later. Now remember, we're talking about a counterfeit Christ. And without getting into it, the words that are used in Revelation 13 are similar to the words that are used in Revelation 5, speaking of Jesus Christ, the Lamb that was slain and rose and risen. This Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. Similar wordings there. That this will be something that will be a picture that will come. Now next week we will look at, he will have a spiritual advisor. The Antichrist will. And he will really come to presence after the assassination and resurrection of this world leader. He will be the one who will take credit for rising him from the dead, and he will convince the world then to follow this man and worship him not just as a leader, but as God. And so, again, we have to wonder exactly how this will take place, whether his body will be, whether his soul will come back, whether he'll be actually, his body will be taken over by the actual devil himself. We don't know. But he will rise again after this fatal wound, and he will be thought of as the Christ. And the world will go after him. So we're talking again, we're in the midst of, we were looking at the judgments, these bizarre, changes in the earth that are going to take place with the weather and the sun and the moon, and possibly the speed of the rotation of the earth, and probably a disturbance somehow in our magnetic basically, Earth, I don't know if you understand this, but we have because of the way our core is, God has made it this way, we have a magnetic, for lack of a better term, force field, a magnetic field around our Earth that actually shuns off lots of meteors. But then you see there's meteors, there's things happening, there's volcanoes around, there's things that are going on in the Earth that are going to be changing this. And in the midst of it, someone dies and then raises again from the dead. And then a couple of hours later, the 2 witnesses raise, prophesy one more time, shot to heaven, earthquake happens. I mean, this will be a very bizarre mark of the halfway point of the tribulation. And so these things are happening. And so this man is killed, and he rises from the dead. And did I give out Revelation 13, 4 through 9? No. Okay. So let's get. I need Revelation 13, 4 through 9. Rose, I need Revelation 17, 9 through 12. Nunu? I need Revelation 12, 1 through 6. Alicia? Isaiah 9, 6 and 7. Darlene? And then Daniel 11, 31 through 39. Randy? Revelation 13, 15. Allie? 2 Thessalonians 2, 4. Jeremy? Matthew 24, 15. Steph? Walton? Revelation, you think that's confusing. In Lithuania, we had 4 Eurates. So that was interesting. Revelation 12 and verse 6, Rowan. And Matthew 24, 16 through 21. Wow. All right. The other two we'll get to if we can. So he's mortally wounded. And so the false prophet, again, we're going to look at him in detail next week. But the Antichrist has this spiritual man, would be modern history, if you will. Rasputin was basically the witch doctor to the czars of Russia. And he was a spiritual leader. And there are lots of nations that have them, and they get kind of strange advisors. But the world will be controlled by the Antichrist. He'll take over after. His real world domination will start after it'll be kind of nice until then. Not that there won't be judgments, but he's not going to tip his whole hand of his hatred to the Jews. And so, but this begins to happen after the assassination and resurrection. Revelation 13, 4 through 9.
So they worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" And he was given a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies. And he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear.
And so here, very clear that the worship of this man is going to be paramount. He's not just going to be a leader, he's going to be seen as a god. Now, many nations in history have taken their kings, Caesars, emperors, whatever, as gods. The term Caesar actually it didn't mean leader in Roman, in the Latin language. It actually was the name of a family who had taken over, and many of us know Julius Caesar. But how that terminology, and they were worshipped as gods. There were temples built to them, there were sacrifices made to them, prayers offered up to them, and how that term, Caesar, actually worked its way through other language. The term Tsar in Russian is from Caesar. The term, the old German leader, Randy would know. What is it?
Wilhelm.
No. The name. Kaiser, that's it. Comes from Caesar. Kaiser is from Caesar. So very fascinating that this mentality, when the United States defeated Japan, this is recent, like history, less than 100 years ago, One of the marks of the surrender was now the emperor was not going to be seen as a god. So this was modern history. Now this man will come on and he will be seen as a god. He will be given authority and he will rule the entire earth for 42 months left. Half of the tribulation. Mark that. Becomes very important. As one man said, it is at that point he will go from peacemaker, because he signs the treaty with Israel, to peace taker. Revelation 17, 9 through 12.
This called for a mind with understanding. The 7 heads of the beast represented the 7 hills where the woman rules. They also represent 7 kings. 5 kings have already fallen. The 6th now reigns. And the 7th is yet to come, but his reign will be brief. The scarlet beast that was, but is no longer, is the 8th king. He is like the other 7, and he too is headed for destruction. The 10 horns of the beast are 10 kings who have not yet risen to power. They will be appointed to their kingdoms for one brief moment to reign with the beast.
Does anyone know the hill, the city that is said to be set on 7 hills? In ancient Rome. Does anyone know where the first treaty of the European Union was signed? I'll give you a hint. It has 7 hills. It's called the Treaty of Rome, that created what was at first called the European Economic Bloc, the ECB, which later became the European Union. We will look at Revelation 7 because he's also talking about, and he makes the distinction, these represent 7 hills and they represent 7 kings. And so very distinct, brought out there in this. I will give you just a tad of conspiracy when it comes to this. And I will leave it at that, because I promised, I mentioned I will be ministering on this in the near future, and I might do it as a Sunday school. I haven't decided yet because there's numbers of videos I want to put in there of this. But that it talks about the kings. And for the first time in 300 years, all the royal families of Europe will have kings, not queens. In fact, Holland's Queen Beatrix, just less than 10 years ago, resigned, gave it over to her son William. We know Elizabeth died. There's other kings. The significance of them may be, now this is conspiracy. This is 101, like freak your mind out kind of thing. And I can't prove this, right? And I'm not a conspiracy buff. But this is a true statement. The Federal Reserve is neither. It is neither federal nor it is a reserve. Did you know that? It's a private bank that the U.S. government owns 20% of. Does anyone know who owns the other 80%? No one does. It's totally secret. That is true of the Bank of England. That is true of the European National Bank, the European Bank. It is true of many, the Canadian National Bank. It is true of many banks. The governments own about 20%, and no one else knows who owns the rest. It's true. You can Google that and find out that that's 100%. The conspiracy behind it is who has the money to set up banks. There's really only one group, and that would be the royal families of Europe. Other than that, who has that kind of money? The Rothschilds don't. The Vanderburgs don't.
That was my first guess, the
These aren't wealthy enough like that. So these could play into who allows, because the Antichrist, as we'll see next week, will be based greatly on economic dominance. And when we get into the whole "how safe is your money" sermon, when you find out that, it's a house of cards. Yes. Banking industry is a house of cards. But that being said, that let me go back in history. The end of World War II, July 1st to July 22nd, the leaders and the victors of World War I in 1944 met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, at a hotel I accidentally went to one time on my honeymoon. It's at the foot of Mount Washington. They established an economic basis for the end of World War II, that all currencies in the world would be linked to the US dollar, and the dollar would be linked to gold. They established 3 groups out of that. They brought in the International Monetary Fund. They established the World Bank, and they established GATT, Global something on tariffs and trade, which eventually became the World Trade Organization. Out of that, very interesting, the leader of the World Bank has always been an American, with one brief moment when it wasn't. And the leader of the International Monetary Fund has always been a European. Always. A Western European. And again, you can go on Wikipedia, look me up on all of that. Those statements are all 100% true. And so, out of that, it is believed that part of the way the Antichrist will take over is economics. And so if the kings and the royal families of Europe do control these banks, because honestly, they're absolutely powerless when it comes to their governments. I mean, the prime minister will go to the king and say, Your Majesty, I'd like to be, the next prime minister. And he'll go, yeah, okay, if your party elected you, what choice do I have? And they'll have meetings with the queen and such, but, or the king now. But they're toothless. Why are they still even recognized? Queen Elizabeth was the richest woman in the world when she died. So where does this all generate from? That's conspiracy. That you might just totally disagree with me on. But the rest of it you can look up. Totally factual. I say all that to say this. There are people who are going to put the Antichrist in power. And much of them will have to do with financial interests of the world. And so this is very, very interesting. Also, and we don't have much time, so we got to move through this very quickly. The Antichrist is going to declare war on Israel at the midway point. Revelation 12, 1 through 6.
Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven, behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his head. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven, and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days.
Okay. So let's ask just 2 questions. And again, I apologize Darren warns me if we get 18 scriptures, we're going to probably go too long. But anyway, who is this woman? A couple of clues we have. She has 12 stars around her head. Who is it? Is it Mary? Understanding of a religious system in the Bible is referred to as a woman. We're going to look at the wicked one that's referred to as a prostitute in a couple of weeks. We mentioned her already in this study. She gave birth to a son that will rule the nations with an iron rod. That is taken right out of Psalms chapter 2, verse 8, speaking of Jesus Christ. You can read it. Just for sake of time, I didn't put it in here. But it's talking about the beast will rise up and he will declare war on this nation. He will go after to fight and to attack and try to cause this woman, Israel, problems for 1,260 days, half of the tribulation. And so we were going to look at this. I'm just going to skip it. I'm sorry. I think she left anyway, Steph. Isaiah talks about the child that's born to us and the government will be upon his shoulders. This is talking about Israel speaking not just as Mary giving birth to a son, but as the nation giving birth to this child. And so the whole Jewish people, the Antichrist then, at this moment will cause something to happen, which is what I want to just touch on before we end this. And this is why I made some statements before. He'll sign a treaty with Israel. This is Daniel 7:20, is it 29? But it's the last verse of the 3.